They erased my career over one blurry photo at a protest. I erased their company with perfect clarity. My name is Elena Morris. I'm 29 years old. And up until 3 months ago, I was a senior marketing analyst at Raventon Retail Group, one of the largest mid-tier retail chains in the Midwest. I wasn't flashy. I didn't crave recognition, but my reports were airtight. My campaigns always landed on target, and my manager once said if I could clone Elena, I would. I started as an intern straight out of college and stayed for almost a decade. Through layoffs, restructuring, leadership shakeups, I stayed. Loyalty wasn't just a value to me. It was my default setting. I worked weekends without overtime. I cleaned up messes from other teams. I helped junior staff fix errors that could have cost us entire ad campaigns. No drama, no complaints. I wasn't aiming to be a star, just someone they could count on. Our office sat on the 22nd floor of a high-rise in downtown Chicago. Open layout, glass walls, plenty of natural light, fake cheerfulness at scale. People smiled a lot, but trust was always thin. The higher you moved up, the sharper the smiles became. I stayed just below that line. It kept me safe. My direct manager, Julia, was sharp, poison, and always 3 steps ahead. She ran our team like a newsroom fast, efficient, and mildly terrifying. But I respected her. She had high standards, and I met them. I'd recently been shortlisted for a promotion to lead a new cross-functional branding initiative, something that could have changed the arc of my career. At least, that was the plan. Then came that Friday. It started like any other black coffee. Inbox triage, morning stand-up, but Julia was unusually quiet. She avoided eye contact. HR had rescheduled our one-on-one for scheduling conflicts. And when I walked into the break room, 2 coworkers I trained from scratch went silent the moment I entered. It was subtle, but I could feel it. Something had shifted, and it had my name on it. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking it, the silence in the break room. The shuffled calendar invites Julia's sudden shift from warm to mechanical. I'd been through enough quarterly chaos to know that weird energy usually meant someone else was about to get cut. Not me, but the signals kept piling up. I stopped receiving invites to the creative review meetings, the ones I used to lead. When I asked about it, Julia just said, "Oh, we're restructuring responsibilities a bit. No big deal." No big deal. I'd spent the last 3 months optimizing that campaign's message flow, and now I wasn't even allowed in the room. Access to our internal analytics dashboard was revoked temporarily. They claimed, due to a security migration. I didn't buy it. I'd been the one managing that system for 2 years. There was no migration, no alerts, no downtime. Someone had flipped a switch behind my back. Slack messages went unanswered. Emails were read but never replied to. People I used to brainstorm with avoided eye contact. My badge still worked. My desk was untouched, but I was no longer in the loop. I'd become a ghost in the system. I started staying late just to feel useful, reviewing tasks that weren't mine, offering help where it wasn't needed. No one ever said it outright, but I felt it in the way people hesitated before speaking to me like I was radioactive. Then came the photo. It was sent to me in a group text from a friend I hadn't seen in months. "Hey, isn't this you?" she asked. I opened it, and there I was, clear enough to recognize, standing on the edge of a public gathering in Grant Park. I wasn't holding a sign. I wasn't chanting. I was just standing there, watching, observing. But someone, somewhere, had taken that image and posted it online with a vague caption that read, "Corporate silence speaks volumes." No company was named, no call-out, just a blurry image, a crowd, and a narrative left wide open for interpretation. The post hadn't gone viral, but it had picked up enough traction to find its way into certain inboxes, apparently the wrong ones. The kind that didn't ask for explanations, the kind that looked at optics, not truth. That was when I knew. This wasn't just tension. It was a countdown. Monday morning came with artificial cheer. Julia greeted me at my desk with a too bright smile and a laminated folder. "HR wants to see you," she said, her tone as flat as her eyes. That's when I knew it wasn't a check-in. The walk down the hall felt longer than usual. The HR director, Megan, someone who once laughed at my holiday sweater and cried at the office baby shower, didn't even offer a seat. Just a small, sterile conference room with one chair and a closed laptop between us. "We've received some concerns," she began. Not complaints, not infractions, concerns. She clicked open a tab on her screen, rotated it toward me, and there it was, the photo. The same blurry image from Grant Park, with my face barely distinguishable and no timestamp. Just enough to say maybe. I wasn't doing anything wrong, I said quietly. I wasn't even involved. Megan didn't blink. The optics are complicated. I almost laughed. Optics. That's what this was about, a vague image and a corporate allergy to ambiguity. "We understand this may come as a surprise," she continued. "Given the nature of your role and your visibility within the company, we've decided it's in everyone's best interest if we part ways." I wasn't even offered the dignity of being fired. It was a gentle shove off a cliff. Dressed in HR speak and meaningless empathy, "You'll receive a severance package." Megan added, 2 months, plus continuation of benefits. "We hope this gives you time to land on your feet." She smiled when she said it, like she was offering me a lifeline, not cutting me loose. My mouth was dry, my palms cold, but I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I had nothing to gain by protesting. It was already done. The decision had been made long before I stepped into that room. "Do you have any questions?" she asked. "Just one. How long have you been waiting to do this?" She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to the laptop like it might save her. I returned to my desk under the eyes of people pretending not to watch. My computer was already locked. A brown cardboard box sat under the desk, like they'd planned every step of this. I dropped my mug, my notepad, my half-used sticky tabs into it. My nameplate stayed behind. No one said goodbye. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the stainless steel walls and thought, so this is how 10 years ends. Not with a conversation, but with a copy-pasted excuse. Outside, the Chicago air was colder than I remembered. I clutched the box tighter and started walking. My hands were shaking, but my spine straighter than ever. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing with violent clarity. They had made a mistake. I didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell my sister why I'd suddenly taken over the couch in her apartment. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling like it owed me answers. On the 4th night, I opened my laptop not to job hunt. Not yet, but to organize the mess in my head. I clicked through old files, reports, timelines, campaign assets. Muscle memory guided me straight to a folder I hadn't opened in months, Q4 marketing spend. There it was, my last project before everything turned. A massive push to rebrand Raventon's home goods line. I'd worked on the message flow. But Julia and the VP had handled most of the budget approvals. Still, the numbers didn't sit right. I remembered flagging a vendor discrepancy back in December of $42. 000 invoice routed through a media consultant I'd never met. I asked Julia about it. Then she waved it off as a pass-through fee and told me not to worry. Back then, I didn't. Now I did. I cross-referenced that invoice with the company name Orvin Strategies. A Google search led me to a landing page with no working links, no case studies, no staff photos, just a contact form and a stock image of a handshake. Suspicious, but not proof, so I dug deeper. My inbox still had archived emails from the finance team, monthly budget summaries I'd been CC'd on. One PDF listed a supplemental allocation to Orvin that didn't match the original invoice. In fact, it was twice as much. And then I found it. A version of the invoice dated 2 days earlier, same amount, same vendor, but routed through a different approver. It had been revised, backdated, and slipped through. Why would they duplicate an invoice unless someone had something to hide? I scanned the metadata on both PDFs. One was uploaded from Julia's work account. The other from a generic temp finance alias I'd never seen before. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just sloppiness. It was choreography. A carefully planted trail, meant to vanish once the campaign closed. I sat back in the dark, the only light coming from the screen. My hands hovered over the keyboard, cold and still. They thought they got rid of me to protect their image, but they'd forgotten the one thing that made me good at my job. I never delete anything. By the end of that week, I had turned my sister's kitchen table into a war room. Spreadsheets, printouts, flash drives, old notebooks all laid out in organized chaos. I hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days, but my focus was razor sharp. This wasn't grief, this was strategy. The more I pulled at the thread, the more everything unraveled. I found 5 more invoices linked to Orvin strategies, each bearing subtle discrepancies, different signatures, date mismatches, odd language in the memo lines. Some were approved by Julia, others by a VP who retired mid-quarter with no farewell party. The amounts varied just enough to avoid triggering red flags in our automated budget system. One document buried deep in my archived files caught my attention, a marketing performance report I'd helped compile but never saw published. It included projected ROI metrics for each vendor. Orvin was listed at the bottom with a footnote, pending results. That report was 3 months old. No updates, no deliverables, nothing. I flagged it back then. 2. The email was still there, unread. Julia never replied. I started mapping names, dates, email trails. A pattern emerged, an approval chain that conveniently shifted every quarter, rotating through just enough hands to avoid suspicion. It wasn't just Julia. It was systemic and messy. At one point, I found myself staring at a Post-it note that read, "Follow the anomalies," scribbled in my own handwriting from months ago. Back then, it was just a reminder to triple-check budget lines. Now it felt prophetic. Then, a message appeared in my inbox, a Gmail address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "They did the same thing to me." Inside was a short message. "I saw the invoice screenshots on your blog. You're not crazy. I worked in finance. They forced me out last year after I asked too many questions. I still have access to the old ledger files. Want them?" There was no name, just a burner email and a timestamp. I stared at the message for a long time. It felt like opening a hidden door and finding someone else on the other side, holding a flashlight. I replied in a single line, "Yes, send everything." 10 minutes later, a zip file hit my inbox. Ledger logs, budget approvals, audit memos, hundreds of them. More than I'd hoped for, more than I knew what to do with. But that didn't scare me. It energized me. I loaded everything into a fresh drive and backed it up twice. Then I shut my laptop, sat back, and whispered one word to myself, "Gotcha." They thought I'd walk away quietly. They thought they were safe, behind polite smiles and non-disclosure clauses. But I wasn't after a settlement. I was after a reckoning. I didn't publish everything. Not yet. I started with questions. A soft launch. I created a Substack under a pseudonym, no photos, no names, just data. I wrote a piece titled, "How to Lose $240, 000 in Q4 without anyone noticing," and embedded screenshots of the Orvin invoices, approval stamps, and budget deltas. I didn't accuse, I didn't speculate. I let the numbers speak. The post got 12 views in the first day, then 30, then 300 by day 5. Someone had linked it on an industry Slack forum. Comments started trickling in. "This looks familiar. Saw something like this before at a past job. Wonder how widespread this really is." That was when the email came. It was short, 1 line. "Take this down. Final warning. No greeting. No signature. Just an empty threat in Helvetica bold." I ignored it. The next morning, my LinkedIn was flagged for suspicious activity and temporarily locked. My domain host received a copyright complaint, fraudulent, of course, and took the blog down for review. I appealed and got it reinstated, but the message was clear. Someone was watching, and they were getting nervous. I started receiving blocked calls at 200 a.m. My sister's car was keyed one night while parked outside our building. The police shrugged it off as a random act of vandalism. Maybe it was, but the timing was hard to ignore. My sister, always supportive, started to get nervous too. "You sure this is worth it?" she asked, watching me tape another backup drive to the underside of a drawer. "Yes," I said, "because if I don't finish this, someone else is next." I barely slept. My phone stayed on silent. Screen down, I turned off location sharing. I wore a hoodie and sunglasses even at the coffee shop. Not because I was hiding, but because they thought they could make me. One afternoon, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know what you're getting into. Leave it." That one got under my skin, not because I was scared, but because it confirmed what I suspected. This wasn't just corporate sloppiness. It was a cover-up, and someone was willing to get dirty to keep it buried. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Who had approved the invoices? who had benefited from them, who had suddenly left or transferred mid-quarter, and who was still there, pretending they didn't know. Then I backed up everything again, locally, on the cloud, and onto 2 encrypted drives I stashed in different places. I printed hard copies of key documents and mailed them to a friend in another state, just in case. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I sent a short, encrypted email to a freelance investigative journalist I followed on Twitter. I didn't say much, just gave them breadcrumbs, enough to pique interest, not enough to burn the whole story. 2 hours later, they replied, "I'm listening. What else do you have?" I smiled. They wanted to rattle me. They wanted me to fold under pressure, disappear like the others had. But that was their mistake, because pressure doesn't break me. It sharpens me. The journalist's name was Cass. At least, that's what she used in her email signature. We started small. I sent over redacted files, spreadsheets with vendor names blacked out, and summaries of what I'd found. She cross-checked my data with public filings, news clippings, and employee rosters. After 3 days, she sent a single sentence that changed everything. "You're sitting on something bigger than you think." She wasn't exaggerating. Orvin Strategies wasn't just a fake vendor. It was one of several shell companies registered to a shared P.O. box in Nevada. Another, listed as a digital consulting firm, had appeared in a class action lawsuit filed 2 years ago against a different company for embezzlement through false billing. That case had been quietly settled. Cass dug deeper. One of Raventon's former VPs, the one who retired mid-quarter, turned out to have briefly served as CFO for the company named in that lawsuit. His name wasn't on any of my files, but Cass found him connected through 2 board affiliations and 1 overlapping LLC, a network built on legal technicalities and silence. I wasn't just dealing with a few shady invoices. I was looking at a pattern of behavior across companies, across industries. One night, Cass messaged me, "You ever hear of Redridge Equity?" They were one of Raventon's private equity backers. Big firm, old money, reputation for aggressive acquisition strategies. I'd seen their name once in a shareholder report, but never thought much of it. Cass thought differently. She found that Redridge had financial stakes in both Raventon and 2 of the shell vendors funneling false invoices. It wasn't just bad management, it was intentional bleeding, possibly to redirect funds elsewhere while the retail division floundered. "I think this goes all the way up," she wrote. I reread that line at least 10 times. The further we went, the colder I felt, like we were walking on a frozen lake that might crack beneath us at any second. And still deep down there was a part of me that hesitated. What if Cass was using me to get a headline? What if she disappeared the moment the story was too dangerous? But then came the message that stopped me cold. It was from the same burner email that sent the finance files. This time, check the August meeting minutes. The internal server still caches them under Legacy board. Don't do it from home. I followed the instructions, went to a public library, logged in using my old VPN credentials, thankfully still active through a backdoor I'd set up during a remote work project. The folder existed. Inside were drafts of leadership call transcripts, performance notes, and 1 heavily edited memo. The original version, still saved in raw text format, referenced asset extraction strategy in Q4, aligned with shareholder rebalancing. The memo had been scrubbed in the official version. The phrase replaced with Q4, operational alignment pending capital shifts. They weren't just hiding bad accounting. They were orchestrating it. I printed everything, stored it, cataloged it, and for the first time in weeks, I sat still, completely silent, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't about getting my job back anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about telling the truth before they could bury it for good. I knew I couldn't take this to Raventon's board. Not directly. Half of them were likely entangled in it. The other half wouldn't risk their positions unless the evidence became too public to ignore. So I shifted strategy. This wasn't about pushing a button. It was about staging a slow detonation with layers of redundancy, timing, and plausible deniability. First, I cataloged every piece of evidence the vendor trail. The duplicate invoices, the scrubbed memos, and the shareholder ties. I grouped them into 3 packets, each one comprehensive enough to cause damage on its own. But together they told the whole story. Then I encrypted and uploaded the packets to multiple cloud services under pseudonymous accounts. Each account was set with a time-delayed trigger if I didn't log in every 72 hours. The files would be auto-emailed to a list of journalists, regulators, and financial blogs. Not all were major names, but enough to make noise. Next, I created a burn notice, a digital summary of everything. No confidential files, just enough for someone to start sniffing. I set that to go live on a hidden Reddit post, with backlinks ready to be posted on whistleblower forums and Discord servers where finance insiders linger. I also reached out to Cass. She was skeptical about going public. She'd had stories shut down before by corporate lawyers. But once I showed her the cache from the legacy server, she didn't hesitate. "Let me run this through legal review." "Quietly," she said. "Once I get clearance, I'll pitch it to a national desk." "Don't wait too long," I replied, "because if I disappear, it won't be quiet anymore." She paused. "Do you think they'd go that far?" "I think they already have." In parallel, I sent a carefully worded tip anonymously to the SEC's whistleblower portal, including hints about Orvin's tax filings and interstate fund transfers. It wasn't a formal complaint, not yet, but it put them on alert. I didn't just prepare for the worst. I rehearsed it. I built dead man's switches, multiple layers of backups, offsite drives, QR-encoded hard copies stored in vacuum-sealed envelopes. I had recovery scripts, auto-forwards, even a physical flash drive hidden in the spine of a fake book on a library shelf. By this point, I slept no more than 4 hours a night. Paranoia became routine. I scanned my devices daily, changed locations every few days, used burner phones for communication. But there was power in the planning, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that for once, I wasn't just reacting, I was dictating the pace. The final step was choosing the moment. Raventon's Q2 shareholder meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, streamed live. Full attendance expected, with the CEO giving a stability update post-restructuring. I circled it in red on my calendar. That would be my drop point. Cass confirmed her article was close to done. I queued up the Reddit post, the backup blog, the automatic email triggers. If I hit send during the meeting, the public would see the press story within minutes. Investors would ask questions mid-call. The board would be blindsided on air. There would be no time to spin. I thought of Julia, of the smirk she wore the day she handed me off to HR, of the silence from people I'd once mentored, who never asked what happened. They thought I was just another employee they could quietly discard. They were about to learn what a well-prepared inconvenience could do. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived with a chill in the air, not the weather, but something colder, sharper. I felt it in my bones. Raventon's live stream went up at 1000 a.m. sharp. The CEO, Nolan Griggs, stood in front of a branded backdrop, voice smooth, gestures rehearsed. He opened with phrases like quarterly resilience, operational synergy, and strategic optimism. I watched from the corner booth of a cafe 2 miles from their headquarters. Laptop open, second phone in hand, hotspot active. The email was pre-written. The Reddit post was loaded. One tap and the entire structure would shudder. 10 minutes into Nolan's speech, I clicked send. The email blast went first over 40 recipients, journalists, auditors, whistleblower platforms, finance watchdogs, and 2 well-known Twitter threads that specialized in corporate takedowns. Then came the Reddit post anonymously uploaded with a breakdown of the shell vendors, tied directly to Raventon, Orvin, and Redridge. Attached were watermarked files that matched the article Cass had just published under the headline, "Shell Games and Shareholders, the Hidden Drain Beneath Raventon Retail." I watched the upvotes climb. On the live stream, Nolan's voice didn't change at first, but a flicker of discomfort crossed his eyes as someone, likely in his earpiece, broke protocol. He paused mid-sentence to acknowledge a technical delay. The background chatter on the call spiked board members whispering, assistants checking devices. The feed froze, stuttered, resumed with a wider shot. Nervous energy thickened. Suddenly, one of the board members on screen turned off his camera. Another muted herself. A third leaned out of frame, speaking to someone off camera with visible urgency. It was the digital equivalent of a fire alarm. Within 20 minutes, Twitter lit up. The journalist Cass had looped in posted screenshots of the invoices. A finance watchdog account quote-tweeted it with, "Looks like someone forgot to close the drain." Hashtags like Raventon leak, retail fraud, and Red Ridge ties began trending. Then the SEC account posted something rare, a public acknowledgement of new material evidence being reviewed. I received no response from Raventon. No denials, no cease and desists, no panicked phone calls. They knew. But the fallout had only just begun. Former employees began commenting anonymously online, saying, "We always knew something was off." One even messaged me through Proton Mail. "You said what we couldn't." "Thank you," Cass messaged. "I'm getting calls from legal teams and 3 TV outlets. This just went nuclear." I smiled, but it was grim. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours that night. I'd stayed up rehearsing everything click order. Message cadence, posting sequence. I was prepared for noise, but I didn't expect the speed. Within 2 hours, Raventon's stock dropped 12%. Red Ridge issued a curt press release denying any knowledge of billing discrepancies. Multiple board members went radio silent on LinkedIn. Julia's profile vanished entirely, and me. I deleted the burner email, scrubbed my backup logins, transferred my data drives to a secure vault in another state, and then I turned everything off. My laptop, my phone, even the part of my mind that still wanted to keep watching. It was done. They could spend the next 6 months putting out fires, hiring PR firms, writing apology memos, blaming each other. I would spend the next 6 months rebuilding my life, on my terms. They had tried to erase me with a blurry photo. I erased them with facts. The real collapse didn't come with a bang. It came with a slow, public unspooling. Over the next week, Raventon became a case study in corporate unraveling. Internal emails leaked. Screenshots of Slack threads circulated, some from employees who had stayed silent for years. A former VP gave a carefully worded interview, implying systemic miscommunication and misplaced accountability. Translation: the walls were cracking. Then came the resignations. 3 board members stepped down by Friday. Julia's name appeared in a headline that read, "Former marketing executive under investigation for fraudulent vendor ties." Her LinkedIn deletion had been strategic, temporary. Red Ridge Equity froze its partnership with Raventon, citing compliance reassessment. And Raventon itself issued a press release so dry it read like it had been written in a panic room. "We take these matters seriously and are cooperating fully." Meanwhile, the SEC formally opened an inquiry. I watched it all from a distance, not out of detachment but self-preservation. I didn't need front row seats. I just needed to know the engine was failing. Cass sent me a screenshot of the viewership stats on her Article 1. 8 million reads in 72 hours. "The inbox is wild," she wrote. "They're finally listening." But it was the smaller things that hit harder. A junior analyst I'd once trained emailed me anonymously. "You gave me the courage to quit. Thank you for making the silence stop." A woman from the finance department I barely remembered messaged. I stayed quiet. "You didn't. I hope you never regret it." Even my sister, who had watched me unravel on her couch, looked up from her laptop one night and said, "I always knew they messed with the wrong one." I didn't reply. I just sat there, exhaling the tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding since that HR meeting. And then something strange happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, like I'd thrown a punch I'd rehearsed 1,000 times, only to find no resistance on the other end. Just air. Maybe that was justice. Maybe that was grief. Still, the world kept spinning. News anchors discussed Raventon's fall as a symptom of deeper cracks in the retail sector. Think pieces were written. Experts were interviewed. Reddit was flooded with copycat whistleblowers from other companies. The truth wasn't just out. It was loud, unignorable, and it had teeth. But I knew this wasn't the end of the story for them. Maybe, but not for me. There were still loose threads to tie, backup plans to retire, pseudonyms to burn. But that part could wait. For the first time in months, I wasn't moving out of fear. I was standing still and no one could fire me for it. This time, the silence was mine, and it was earned. A week after the chaos broke, I got an email I didn't expect. Subject line: "Let's talk Raventon external consultant." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. The sender wasn't anyone I recognized. A consulting firm acting as third-party crisis management. They were assisting with strategic restructuring and internal audit communications. According to the signature, the message was polite, almost too polite. We understand your unique insight into recent events and would be open to discussing a potential advisory role to help guide transparency efforts moving forward. Translation: they wanted me to help clean up the mess. I didn't reply immediately. I wanted to see how far they'd go. The next day, I got a call-blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. It was the consultant again, this time with a voice as smooth as their email. We believe in second chances, and it's clear you're someone who values integrity. We'd be honored to hear your ideas on how to rebuild trust. I laughed out loud. In the middle of the kitchen, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, I laughed until my eyes watered. The same company that tossed me aside without a second thought now wanted me to help them rewrite their redemption arc. Not because they'd changed, but because they got caught. There was a time when I might have said yes, out of loyalty, or pride, or the need to prove I still mattered. But that version of me, she didn't live here anymore. A day later, Kaz forwarded another message. This one was different. It came from a small but reputable private equity firm, one I hadn't connected to Raventon or Redridge. They had read the story, followed the paper trail, and wanted to talk. We're building a new retail group, one with clean books and cleaner leadership. We'd like you to consider leading strategic operations. It wasn't a sympathy offer. They attached references, compensation, vision. They saw me not as a whistleblower, but as an operator, a builder, a risk-taker who still gave a damn about doing things right. I stared at the screen for a long time. My instinct was to flinch, to ask myself whether I deserved it, whether I was being used again. But then I realized this wasn't about what I deserved. It was about what I allowed next. I took a breath. After everything, I didn't know if I trusted anyone, but I trusted myself. And this time, I wouldn't step into any system I couldn't shape. I replied with 3 words. Let's schedule time. Not because I needed the job, but because I'd finally earned the right to choose. The offer sat in my inbox for 3 days. I didn't touch it, didn't forward it, didn't open the attachments again. I just let it sit there, like a question I wasn't ready to answer. For so long, I'd been in survival mode, investigating, reacting, outsmarting people with more power and fewer morals. And now, come. Opportunity, a strange silence that didn't feel threatening. I walked around the city those 3 days with no destination. I watched people sip coffee, type emails, argue over nothing. I remembered what it felt like to be one of them, busy, distracted, trusting systems I never thought would turn on me. At a park bench near Union Station, I sat for an hour and watched a kid chase pigeons until he collapsed into giggles. I realized it was the first time I'd smiled, truly smiled in weeks, maybe months. And then I remembered the box, the one I carried out of Raventon, my mug, my notepad, my half-used sticky tabs, that cardboard container of quiet humiliation. I hadn't opened it since I left. It still sat in the corner of my sister's closet. On the 4th day, I pulled it down and took everything out, piece by piece. I ran my fingers over the Sharpie-inked name tag. I held the notepad to the light and saw faint impressions of old to-do lists, and I cried, not because I was sad, but because I'd finally made room for the weight of everything to land. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was something rare or free. So I went back to my laptop, opened the email, and started typing not to accept or reject, but to reshape. If they wanted me, they'd get me on my terms. Full autonomy, non-negotiable oversight, the right to walk away at any time, no penalty. I hit send. Later that night, I posted something on LinkedIn, my first post in months. Don't let the door they closed behind you be the only exit. There's always another way out, and sometimes it leads to something better. I didn't post it for sympathy. I posted it for the version of me who once sat in HR, silent, thinking it was over. That version didn't know that endings can be repurposed. That version didn't know that sometimes the real story starts after the lights go out. And now she does, and so do I. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of a new office. Not Raventon, not a rebirth of the same system. Something better, clean walls, natural light, desks arranged in clusters, not rows. No security cameras aimed at break rooms. No buzzwords printed in giant vinyl letters on the glass. Just work and the people doing it. There was a communal library, not just for industry white papers, but novels, poetry, biographies, a quiet corner for phone calls, and a small sign above the coffee machine that read, "Ask questions. If no one can answer, ask again louder." I wasn't there for an interview. I wasn't even there for a tour. I was there because I built this place, helped draft the hiring policy, interviewed every department head, wrote the culture code myself, 3 pages, no fluff. The board I chose them, the funding clean, the purpose transparent from day one. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm taxis, sirens, people late for something, but inside, there was calm, focus, integrity, not as a slogan, but as the foundation. One of the interns, 18, sharp, still asking if they're allowed to speak up, walked up to me, holding a notepad. "Can I ask how you got here?" she said. I thought for a moment. Not about the steps, not about the data, the posts, the headlines, but about the silence, the long way. I said, "But I brought a map, so no one else has to guess." She smiled, nodded, and walked away. As I watched her go, I remembered myself not too long ago standing alone in an HR room, blinds down, a severance envelope on the table. Back then, I thought the story ended there. I had no idea it was only chapter 1. I stayed in that lobby for another minute, taking it in, breathing it in, not as a visitor, not as a survivor, but as someone who wrote the final page and then started a new book. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about reclamation, of time, of truth, of the right to not be invisible when things go wrong. They erased my career with a blurry photo, but I built something they couldn't delete, something real. And that's mine to keep.